There is a moment that happens in every room. It lasts less than 3 seconds. Most people never notice it. But the wealthiest Jewish families in the world have been trained to catch it since before they could read. It is not the clothes you are wearing. It is not how firm your handshake is. It is not even whether you make eye contact when you speak. It is something far more primitive, far more revealing. And once you understand what it is, you will never be able to unsee it in yourself or in anyone around you. Here is what makes this so devastating. You have been broadcasting this signal your entire adult life without knowing it. Every room you have walked into, every negotiation you have sat down for, every opportunity that somehow slipped through your fingers at the last second. The signal was there, and the people who recognized it made their decisions accordingly. By the time this is finished, you will understand exactly what that signal is, where it comes from, and the precise method drawn from centuries of Jewish behavioral tradition that can permanently silence it. But you need to stay present for the entire journey, because the final piece, the one that ties everything together, is the piece that most people never reach. And without it, none of the earlier knowledge will fully take root. My name is not important. What is important is that I have spent the last 37 years studying the intersection of ancient Hebraic wisdom and human behavioral psychology. My great-uncle Shmaryahu was a scholar in Thessaloniki whose understanding of body language, of posture, of physical presence in relation to prosperity was so precise that businessmen traveled from 3 countries to sit across from him for a single afternoon. His teacher before him, a man named Eliezer Vidal, had developed these same principles during decades of observation in the merchant quarters of Alexandria. This lineage of knowledge did not come from books. It came from watching, from reading, from understanding the invisible architecture of the human body and what it reveals about the invisible architecture of the human mind. I inherited this knowledge carefully. I did not rush it. And for most of my life, I shared it only with those who found their way to me through the right channels. But something shifted in me recently. I began watching the world and I saw too many people struggling in ways that had nothing to do with intelligence or effort or deserving. They were struggling because nobody had ever given them the key. Today, I am giving it to you. But first, I need you to understand something that almost nobody in the modern world will tell you. There is a reason the Jewish people, a people who have been expelled from nations, stripped of property, scattered across every continent, have consistently rebuilt their wealth within a generation of every catastrophe. It is not networking, though they understand networks. It is not education, though they revere it. It is not even the famous emphasis on business and negotiation, though both are real. The true reason is something Eliezer Vidal articulated in a letter that my great-uncle kept folded inside a worn prayer book for 60 years. He wrote, "The body does not lie about what the mind believes, and the mind does not lie about what the soul expects." Read that again. The body does not lie about what the mind believes, and the mind does not lie about what the soul expects. What Eliezer was describing is something modern neuroscience has only recently begun to quantify. But Jewish scholars understood it centuries ago. Your physical posture, the micro-expressions that cross your face in unguarded moments, the way you hold your shoulders when you enter an unfamiliar space, the speed at which your eyes settle or dart, the particular tension in your jaw when money is mentioned. All of it is a precise readout of your deepest financial beliefs. And those beliefs, not your effort, not your intelligence, not your strategy, are what determine whether wealth moves toward you or around you. When a person from a generationally wealthy Jewish family walks into a room with you, they are not being social. They are reading. And what they are reading, they have been trained to read the way a doctor reads an X-ray. Let me describe exactly what they see. The first signal is what Shmaryahu called the threshold hesitation. Watch someone walk through a door into a room where successful, wealthy people are gathered. Watch the precise moment they cross from outside to inside. What does their body do? A person who carries what the old scholars called a poverty expectation will pause. Sometimes it is barely visible, a fraction of a second of suspension, a slight drawing inward of the shoulders, a micro-contraction, as if some ancient part of the nervous system is preparing for rejection. The eyes will make a quick involuntary survey, not the confident scan of someone taking inventory, but but the anxious sweep of someone searching for where they might be unwelcome. This is not shyness. This is not introversion. This is the body broadcasting what the deepest layer of belief holds as true, that abundance belongs to others, that this room was built for someone else, that the person entering is a guest in a world they do not fully belong to. Shmaryahu told me that in 40 years of observation, he had never once seen a person with this threshold hesitation achieve lasting wealth. Never. Because the hesitation is not the problem. The hesitation is the symptom. And the disease underneath it is a belief so old and so deep that most people have no conscious awareness of it whatsoever. The second signal is what the old tradition calls the money flinch. Bring up the subject of a large sum of money in conversation. Not in a threatening way, just naturally. Mention a property that sold for $2 million. Mention a deal worth $500,000. Mention that a mutual acquaintance recently made a significant investment. Watch what happens to the face of the person beside you in the 3 seconds after you say the number. In a person whose relationship with money is one of scarcity, the face will do something involuntary. It might be a nearly imperceptible tightening around the eyes. It might be a slight flare of the nostrils, followed immediately by a compression of the lips, as if the body is physically bracing. It might be a barely visible swallow. These are not conscious reactions. They cannot be performed or suppressed without enormous training, because they emerge from a part of the nervous system that operates below awareness. What they reveal is that the body has coded large sums of money as a source of stress, rather than a source of possibility. And when the body codes something as stress, it activates all the ancient survival mechanisms that were designed for physical threats. The blood moves away from the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for creative problem-solving and opportunity recognition, and toward the parts of the brain designed for defense, which means that at the exact moment a significant financial opportunity appears, the person's brain is least equipped to recognize and pursue it. The old rabbinical scholars did not have the language of neuroscience, but they understood this mechanism completely. There is a text, very old, studied privately within certain communities, that speaks of the person who has made peace with abundance and the person who is at war with it. The text says that the one who is at war with abundance will be defeated by abundance at every encounter, not because the universe is punishing them, but because war requires a posture, and the posture of war is incompatible with the posture of receiving. The third signal is the most subtle, and in my observation, the most decisive. It is something I have come to call the estimation error. Here is how it reveals itself. When a person who carries deep financial limitation beliefs is asked to estimate their own value, either literally in a negotiation or symbolically in a conversation about their work, their contributions, their ideas, they will almost always estimate low, and they will do it quickly. The speed is important. They will not pause to genuinely consider. They will not let themselves sit in the discomfort of asking for what they actually deserve. They will reach immediately and almost involuntarily for a number or a level of expectation that feels safe, that feels unlikely to be rejected. The problem is that this quick low estimate is not humility. Humility is conscious. This is something else. This is the body and mind working together to protect the person from the experience of being told they are worth less than they asked. It is a preemptive defense, and like all preemptive defenses, it costs more than whatever it is protecting against. My great-uncle Shmaryahu had a way of testing this in the people who came to consult with him. He would ask them a single question during the first meeting. He would lean forward, look at them steadily, and say, "Tell me the number that would change your life. The real number, not the one you think is realistic, the one that would actually change everything." He told me that in almost 40 years of asking that question, fewer than 1 in 15 people answered immediately with the real number. Most people paused, made a calculation that had nothing to do with what they actually needed, and gave a number that was survivable if rejected. A number that had been moderated, filtered, made acceptable before it was even spoken aloud. That filtering, he said, was the truest measure of how much internal work remained. Now I want to teach you what can actually be done about this. Because I did not share all of this simply to name the problem. I shared it because naming the problem is the preparation. What comes next is the transformation. The method I am about to teach you comes from a practice developed across generations within certain Sephardic and Ashkenazi scholarly families. It does not require any particular religious belief. It requires only precision and sincerity. It is a practice of what the tradition calls Chazarat HaMatzav, which means the restoration of true position, returning the body and the self to the position they were designed to occupy before fear and scarcity rerouted them. Before you begin, you need to understand that this is not a relaxation exercise. This is not visualization in the contemporary self-help sense. This is a precise physical and mental protocol that systematically retrains the nervous system's relationship with abundance. You will feel resistance. That resistance is the signal that the practice is working. The first element is what Shmaryahu called the entrance practice. Choose a doorway, any significant threshold in your daily life. Your front door, the entrance to your office, the door of any room where important conversations happen. For a minimum of 30 days, every single time you cross that threshold, you will do the following. You will stop completely. You will stand in the opening itself, not before it and not through it, but in it. You will take one complete breath, and during that breath you will consciously occupy the full width of the doorway, not physically but in your awareness. You will expand your sense of your own presence to fill the space you are standing in. This sounds too simple. That is deliberate. The simplicity is the point. The threshold hesitation that wealthy readers of body language notice is an automatic pattern. It cannot be addressed with complicated techniques because complicated techniques require the prefrontal cortex, and the pattern happens below it. It can only be addressed with a practice that is itself automatic. 30 days of this practice begins to reroute the pattern at the level where it actually lives. The second element is the money encounter practice. For the next 30 days, you will deliberately expose yourself to the presence of significant sums. Not to spend, not to acquire, simply to encounter. Visit places where wealth is present and visible. Walk through the lobby of a hotel that is above your current financial station. Browse the window of a shop where the prices are beyond your current reach. Sit for 30 minutes in a restaurant where the clientele are visibly prosperous, and order only a coffee if that is what your budget allows. The purpose is not aspiration. The purpose is desensitization. The money flinch that the old scholars identified exists because the nervous system has been conditioned to treat significant wealth as foreign, as threatening, as something that exists in a different category of reality than the one you inhabit. Deliberate and repeated exposure, without the pressure of transaction or performance, begins to reclassify wealth in the nervous system from threat to environment. This is not a metaphor. This is how the nervous system actually works. Shmaryahu would take the young man who came to study with him and walk them through the market quarters of the city, not to buy, to walk, to be present, to allow their bodies to normalize an environment of visible prosperity. After 30 days of this, he said, the flinch begins to soften. After 60, it often disappears entirely. The third element is the most demanding and the most transformative. It is the practice of the true number. Every morning before you speak to anyone and before you look at any screen, you will take 3 minutes to sit in silence and ask yourself Shmaryahu's question. What is the number that would change everything? Not the survivable number, not the moderate number, the real one. And then you will write it down. Every morning, the same number or a different one, but always the real one. The act of writing is important. The old tradition understood something about the movement of thought into physical form that modern psychology has only recently begun to confirm. When you write a number, the brain processes it differently than when you think it. The filters that moderate your financial self-expression are partially bypassed. The number lands with a different weight. Over time, something unexpected begins to happen. The number becomes less frightening. Not because it has become smaller, because you have become larger. The regular encounter with your own true expectation gradually dissolves the mechanism that makes low estimation feel like safety. There is a passage from the scholarly tradition that Eliezer Vidal cited in that letter my great-uncle carried. It says that a person who does not know their own value becomes the instrument of those who do. This was not written as a warning. It was written as a law, as a description of how the world actually works, rather than how we wish it did. When you do not know your value, when your body hesitates at thresholds and flinches at large numbers and reaches automatically for what feels survivable, you become legible to those who have been trained to read that language. And what they read in you tells them what you are willing to accept, which is precisely what they will offer. This is not cynicism. This is the mechanism. And the mechanism operates in every negotiation, every opportunity, every room where two people sit across from each other. And the invisible question hangs in the air. What does this person believe they deserve? The body answers that question before the mouth opens. I want to tell you something that took me many years to fully understand. My great-uncle Shmaryahu was not a wealthy man in the conventional sense. He did not accumulate property or build businesses. But every person of genuine generational wealth who passed through his city knew his name. They sought his counsel. They sent their children to sit across from him, not because of what he possessed, but because of what he understood. What he understood was that the accumulation of wealth is not primarily a tactical problem. It is a constitutional one. It is a question of what the nervous system believes is possible, what the body has learned to expect, and whether the internal posture of the person matches the external posture that prosperity requires. He spent his life helping people change their constitution, not their circumstances, their constitution, and he watched over and over as the circumstances followed. I have spent my own career doing the same work, and what I can tell you with complete certainty after decades of this is that the body language readers from wealthy Jewish families are not performing some mystical assessment. They are doing something entirely precise and entirely learnable. They are noticing whether the person before them has done the internal work of aligning themselves with prosperity, whether the hesitations have been cleared, whether the flinch has softened, whether the estimation error has been corrected. When those things have been addressed, the body tells a completely different story. And people who have been trained to read that story respond accordingly. Doors open that were not open before. Conversations go differently. Opportunities that existed before but passed unnoticed begin to become visible. This is not magic. This is the natural consequence of presenting the correct signal. You have been presenting a signal your entire life. The question is only whether it has been the one you intended. The 3 practices I have given you are the beginning. The threshold practice, the money encounter practice, and the true number practice. Begin them tomorrow, not when the time feels right, tomorrow, because the old tradition is very clear on one point. The person who waits for readiness before beginning is not waiting for readiness. They are performing the most elaborate version of the estimation error. They are placing a low value on the urgency of their own transformation. There is one final thing I want to give you. Eliezer Vidal ended that letter, the one my great-uncle kept for 60 years in the worn prayer book, with a sentence that I have returned to more times than I can count. He wrote it in a mixture of Ladino and Hebrew that my great-uncle translated for me when I was young. The translation he gave me was this: "The inheritance of the wise is not what they were given, it is what they learned to receive." Not what they were given, what they learned to receive. The difference between those two things is everything. Every principle that the old scholars preserved across centuries and catastrophe and exile is ultimately in service of that one distinction. The capacity to receive is not passive. It is one of the most active and demanding things a human being can cultivate. It requires the clearing of hesitation, the dissolution of the flinch, the restoration of a true and unmoderated knowledge of your own worth. The signal you send when those things are in place is unmistakable. It has always been unmistakable. The wealthiest families in the oldest traditions have always been able to read it. The question now is whether you are ready to begin sending it. Start tomorrow. Start with the doorway. The rest will follow.